fucking unit back on!
There were bits and pieces of him all over the place. We put what was left on the rubbish tip. The corporal was impaled by that safety support. Never knew what hit him.
And the girl.
She drowned in her car. I don't think she was conscious.
I briefly went over Alien 3 in my video about James Cameron's sequels. That video focused on Aliens and Terminator 2, and how they followed up on Alien and the Terminator. But I also talked about Alien 3 and Terminator 3, and how they failed in many ways that the previous films succeeded. The plot of Alien 3 has Ripley crash land on Fury 161, a desolate planet with the only population being a prison of violent offenders. The other survivors from Aliens are all killed in the crash, but a single alien made it to the planet via Ripley's escape ship, and soon a fully grown alien begins stalking and killing the inmates and staff. It is up to Ripley and the prisoners to join forces to not just defeat the alien, but to prevent the sinister ALIEN³ Corporation from acquiring one for their bioweapons division. I mentioned how Alien 3 has a lot of little things that hold it back, especially in the theatrical cut. I don't actually hate Alien 3 or think that it is a bad movie, but I think that it is a bad sequel, and that it is a very important distinction to make. A sequel to something should, in most circumstances, try to continue on with the themes of the original, and treat the series and its characters with respect. James Bond movies rarely acknowledge their predecessors, and were mostly standalone movies until the Daniel Craig era, but have the things that people want in a Bond movie. Good action, cool gadgets, sick cars, and hot women. They may be bad sequels at continuing the story and themes, but they deliver what people want out of the movie, so are good sequels at satisfying their audience. Alien 3 is a movie that generated a lot of discussion. It was hard to imagine sequels to a popular movie getting worse, until the 2000s and 2010s came along and we realized how so very wrong we all were. The movie's reputation has become a little more mixed, especially since the assembly cut was released in 2003, which restores deleted scenes and subplots and is widely regarded as superior to the theatrical cut. Since there has been a lot of discussion, this video will focus on the nature of being a sequel to a previous film, as Alien 3, as a movie completely divorced from its series, is completely fine and has a fair amount of good things to say about it. It looks great, some of the actors deliver strong performances, and the practical effects still hold up today, in places. A key reason for Alien 3's decrease in quality from Alien and Aliens is the fact that it had a very different production process. Unlike the previous two, it was expected to be a big blockbuster, and therefore had a lot of attention from studio executives, and the result was too many chefs spoiling the broth. Alien 3's production became the stuff of infamy, going through numerous scripts and writers, and costly and time-consuming reshoots, which resulted in the director David Fincher disowning the movie. Fox kept umming and ahhing and changing their minds, and scripts were thrown out constantly, despite the film's impending release date giving them pressure to start working as soon as possible. Numerous writers had a go of making a script for Alien 3. William Gibson wrote 2 action scripts with Hicks and Bishop as the lead heroes, and Eric Red would write a script set in a small-town USA settlement on a space station. But both writers, along with prospective director Renny Harlin, were shit-canned. The final script is a Frankenstein's monster of 2 later scripts. David Tui's script, which had secret experiments on the alien performed on a prison asteroid run by ALIEN³, and made no reference to the earlier film, and Vincent Ward's script, which featured Ripley crash landing on a planet that was a giant wooden monastery run by space monks. The 2 scripts were mashed together, using the prison setting without the secret experiments, and the religious order of the planet's population without them being actual monks. Scenes such as Warden Andrews' death are lifted from the Vincent Ward script, which had a large set piece of the alien being lured into a massive glassworks, which in turn inspired the finale where the alien is lured into the leadworks. Vincent Ward's Wooden Planet script is clearly written by someone who didn't care too much about making a sequel to a popular movie, and who wanted to make his own movie. Creativity is usually a good thing, but it is a difficult balancing act between coming up with new things and honouring what has come before. He had Newt killed off, as well as Hicks and Bishop, as he wanted to tell a story about Ripley recovering from a great loss, which is all well and good except that already happens in Aliens. His comments that he found Newt annoying makes him sound like someone who finds fun and good feelings a distraction. He also inserts all these ideas that don't really mesh with what has been seen before, like the wooden world setting and the monastic order. Ward's script also had issues with the plot, which had yet to be fixed via revision. There are weird scenes of black comedy in the script that feel out of place with the rest of the series. The most glaring example is the scene where the alien attacks the head monks via their lavatories. The scene is written in this childish way, and the audience is meant to side with the alien as it attacks characters who were assholes to Ripley earlier. Some of this black comedy survives in the finished movie, weirdly enough, and whether it works or not depends on your sense of humor, I guess.
Fuck!
I should clarify that there is nothing wrong with the idea of breaking tension with a joke, but a poorly executed joke can ruin the tension in a scene. Jokes are best used after a tense scene, rather than during it.
What the fuck are you doing? What? Don't hold it like that. Hold it like this.
What the
You'll
fuck?
fucking kill someone, you fucking moron.
Like the finished movie, the script doesn't explain how the aliens got onto the Sulaco. There's a sheep alien with wool on it and an ass face, which would have appeared in a trippy dream sequence. A character, called the Abbot, mere hours after being impregnated, is killed by an alien erupting from his head, a head burster. There's also a bizarre moment where a character beats a chest burster out of Ripley, and then the chest burster leaves via her mouth and then goes into his mouth. I'm not exactly sure what is going on there, but if you had a way to have a chest burster leave someone's body, why would you then let it enter your body? I don't know. The script, like the finished movie, has a large cast of faceless secondary characters who are purely alien fodder, and also has contradictory gestation times for the chestburster. It's something that should have been fixed with revisions, but many of its issues are in the finished movie despite the chaotic rewrites and reshoots. The messy and flawed script was made worse by having changes made during the filming. Eventually, the shoot was suspended so that rewrites could be made for reshoots to be held later. This made it inevitable that the theatrical version of the film would be a mess and was panned by many people. The assembly cut does a much better job of being a coherent movie, but still has some issues with the plot that I'll go into later. Suffice to say, a combination of too many changes of direction in the scripting phase, and the rush to get a script ready to get production going ahead for the film's summer 1992 release date, resulted in a movie full of interesting ideas that simply don't work together, and should have been fixed in scripting instead of being filmed. Alien 3 has a much larger cast than its predecessors, but despite its size, there are few characters as memorable or as interesting as, say, Parker or Hudson. The movie is set on Fury 161, a prison planet, and the prison population is large, the cast of characters much larger than the crew of the Nostromo or the Sulaco. While Aliens shows boardroom meetings, Gateway Station, and the colony before the alien infestation, these are just background and minor characters. Alien 3 has a large cast of background and minor characters, and nearly all of them are involved in the battle for survival. The result is that most of the characters are bland and forgettable, as the movie doesn't have time to develop them all. This is worse in the theatrical cut, which deletes many scenes, and even an entire subplot where the alien is successfully captured in a waste dump, only for Golic, who has gone mad and feels a bond with the alien, to free it. This subplot also gave a conclusion to Junior, one of the prisoners who earlier tried to rape Ripley, as he sacrifices himself to trap the alien in the dump. At many points, a character the audience hardly knows is gruesomely killed, which is something more commonly seen in lesser regarded horror movies. The deaths are also gorier than in previous movies, which is fine, but it's telling that the movie is relying on gore over characterization to engage the audience. The bland cast is made worse by the fact that most are bald, white, and have British accents, making them easier to get mixed up with one another. There's a few guys with different accents, and they die almost immediately.
What the shit is doing, man?
Swearing.
Shut up. It's a right to say shit. It ain't against God.
What the hell is going on with the candles?
You can't go in there, dickhead. The big motherfucker will eat you alive. Sorry.
On the same side of the coin, the prison setting looks great, but it's bleak and repetitive. Alien has a cast of 7, Alien's just 8 after the dropship crash, while Alien 3 has Ripley, 3 staff, and 22 prisoners. It's also hard to feel sympathy for them since they did violent, horrible things to get sent to Fury 161 in the first place. Dylan,
You son of a bitch!
gets a lot of screen time and is portrayed very well by Charles S. Dutton, but he's just one prisoner. The only other prisoner to get significant screen time is Golic, who is insane and tries to team up with the alien. The main cast that matters is Ripley, Warden Andrews, Aaron, or 85, Clemens, Dylan, and Golic. Two of the more prominent and interesting members of the cast, Clemens and Andrews, are killed off suddenly and very close together at the halfway point of the movie, which is doubly a shame because they had significantly more screen presence than many of the characters still alive at this point. While it is shocking when they are killed, and serves to make no one feel safe, it leaves just Ripley, 85, Dylan, and Golic of the group of 6 I mentioned earlier remaining alive. It's not that the actors are bad, they're actually good, and none of them give a really bad performance. It's just that the characters they have to portray have all these issues beyond their control. Alien and Aliens not only also had strong casts, but characters that were well written, distinctive, and memorable, something which I believe only applies to Ripley and Dylan in Alien 3. The film's cast is also less likable and relatable than those in its predecessors. Alien has a cast of blue-collar workers, very relatable to ordinary people. Similarly, Aliens has a cast of people doing their jobs. The crews of both ships have their roles to play in a team, and the equipment that they use, while being science fiction, don't look unrecognizable from the technology of the time. Hudson is a very relatable and a well-loved character in Aliens, not because the people watching are also Space Marines, but because they would react the same way in his situation. However, Alien 3 has a cast mostly made up of murderers and rapists on one end of the scale, and hardcore Christians on the other end, with very little personality or background traits to really make them stand out from each other. They aren't relatable or identifiable to most of the audience. Dylan is the most likable and relatable of the inmates since he cares for the well-being of his brothers, and has an active role in the story. The casts of the previous movies, especially Aliens, are mostly one-note characters with not too much depth and a fairly narrow range of emotions. Hicks is the cool and collected leader, Hudson is the brash and outspoken one who panics under pressure, Vasquez is the tough chick who barely puts up with Hudson, Burke is the seemingly nice corporate weasel, Newt is the frightened little girl. The characters are pretty simple, but the strength of simple characters is that you put them in a room together and they bounce off each other really well.
To be a lot of these parasites, right? One for each colonist, that's over 100 at least.
Yes, that follows.
So who's laying these eggs?
Hey, maybe it's like an ant hive.
Bees, man. Bees have hives.
You know what I mean. There's like one female that runs the whole show.
Yes, the queen.
Yeah, the mama. She's badass, man. I mean big.
These things ain't ants.
I know
Torpedo.
that.
Alien 3 also has not overly complicated characters, yet the fact that so many of them aren't distinctive from one another is something to the movie's detriment. If there was a small group of prisoners who were given more prominence, and they each had distinctive personalities, it would go a long way to make the cast more interesting, likable, and relatable. The prisoners do have some personalities and quirks, but they all just blur together into a horrible mass, like some sort of creepypasta where people are fused together into a horrible mass. Alien 3 is a movie with strong themes and moodiness, but with flat characters, and for all of the film's mood and atmosphere, its lack of strong characters is a massive detraction. Alien 3's treatment of the alien is at odds with the portrayal seen in Alien and Aliens. While it's not as extreme as the Predators in The Predator, wanting to make human hybrids and seeing fucking autism as an advancement in human evolution, the changes made to the creatures here still detract from the experience as a sequel to a previous film.
Sounds delicious. A nice big juicy ass burger.
Oh yeah.
The alien is shown gruesomely killing and devouring its victims, something that no alien up till now has done. While there are scenes where aliens attack and kill people in Alien and Aliens, there are also many instances of characters being dragged away to be used as hosts to produce more aliens. If you take into account deleted scenes, the alien was egg-morphing its victims in Alien, and Burke was also taken to be used as a host in Aliens. The alien in Alien 3 makes no effort to do so, gruesomely killing its victims and then chewing on their bodies in ways not seen in previous films. A sequence where it was to be revealed that the alien was egg-morphing its victims, the starting process of forming a new hive, was scripted but never filmed. That didn't stop the disorganized production from having cocoon props constructed anyway. David Fincher canned the sequence as he felt that the alien would simply kill for food, which is something they simply aren't shown doing. But he would use a cocoon as a weird hiding place in order to relax. There's a few other things which rub me the wrong way. The alien spits acid, something they'd never been seen doing before and is only used in one scene. This would have been a very useful ability for some of the aliens to have in the past. At least Alien Resurrection was consistent and brought it back. Chestburster growth is shown to take about a day in Alien, while the queen chestburster inside of Ripley takes far longer. This was something that Alien vs Predator also got wrong, but in the other direction. Characters having chestbursters gestate much more quickly than in previous films. Compare these changes of behaviour and abilities to that scene in Aliens, the first sequel to Alien. Aliens introduces the Alien Queen, a larger version of the alien whose role it is to command the aliens, and to lay their eggs which carry the facehuggers. The eggs had already been established in the first movie, and the new addition to the lore explains where the eggs came from. It doesn't clash with anything the audience already knows in Alien. Aliens also changes the alien's head shape, the smooth dome giving way to a more rigid one. The reason for doing so was that the domed head props cracked more easily during filming, while the ridged ones were stronger. This is never given an explanation in the movie, but unlike the changes I mentioned in Alien 3's portrayal of the alien, it doesn't impact the story at all. While the alien killing its victims and not making a hive, and the acid spit do impact the story and raise questions. That all said, there are some additions to the lore which make sense and are interesting. The alien refuses to attack Ripley until later in the movie when she provokes it, since she has a queen chestburster inside her. This makes sense that the alien could somehow sense the presence of a chestburster, and it would be useful to know when victims cocooned in their hive have been impregnated. But it raises the question of why the alien doesn't simply abduct Ripley and leave her trapped somewhere until the chestburster is ready to emerge. Also, if the alien is just simply killing for food, why would it be protective of Ripley? Finally, the movie reveals that the alien's body shape is partially based on its host. After being bipedal after using human hosts in Alien and Aliens, the alien in Alien 3 is a quadruped after coming out of a dog in the theatrical cut, or an ox in the assembly cut. There's a few other differences in its body shape, such as the dorsal spines. This change is still a part of the series, being used to explain all sorts of wacky alien toys and comic book variations, but also the Predalien from the Alien vs Predator franchise. And the biggest and worst change of all, a change so horrifying that Child Tin Man was incredibly upset. The pulse rifles return, but no longer make the awesome sounds they make in Aliens.
What's this going to achieve?
That's a bigger loss than Michael Biehn. All of the Alien movies, even the most recent ones, have a mixture of good and not so good special effects. Alien, despite its small budget, has great model shots of the spaceships, the practical sets for the Nostromo and the Engineer spaceship, and the alien suit. That said, the alien suit was very stiff, limiting the movement of the suit performer Balaji Badeja. Aliens also had a relatively small budget, but was still able to have convincing special effects. Highlights are the miniature effects for the alien hive, the alien queen animatronic puppet, model shots of the spaceships, and the puppet aliens that were used for when they're shot. That said, the alien suits were actually just spandex with plastic bits glued on. This allowed the suit performers to move quickly and acrobatically, but the suits needed to be filmed in shadow to avoid giving away how bare bones they actually were. The movie also relies on matte paintings, some more obvious than others, and while some dropship shots are good, others aren't that good, and somewhat give away that the movie was made in the 1980s and wasn't a mega blockbuster in terms of budget. In particular, there's a few rear projection shots which really age poorly and don't look as great as some of the other effects. In Alien 3, however, the special effects aren't as impressive as they are in Alien or Aliens, despite a higher budget. The most glaring example is the rod puppet used for shots of the alien running or crawling on walls, as it isn't composited in very well. It's actually so jarring that many people mistake it for early CGI. It isn't. It's a rod puppet that is composited in via blue screen. There are some other minor bits of CGI here and there. The planet debris in the wind is CGI, and some of the aliens' shadows are too, in combination with old school rotoscoping. The only CGI shot for the alien is this one here, where its head cracks open after being hit by the sprinkler. There's also another shot of some molten lead that is CGI. It's actually kind of crazy that one of the best special effects in the movie is Sigourney Weaver's bald cap that was used in the reshoots. Sigourney Weaver had it in her contract that she would be given a $40,000 bonus if she had to shave her head again for reshoots, as it would delay in regrowing it. When reshoots became required to finish the movie, the producers decided to instead spend $16,000 on the greatest bald cap ever in order to save some money.
Shaving somebody's head and putting a bald cap on is one thing, and it's very hard to do on a woman to begin with. But to have stubble embedded into the bald cap, I don't think it had ever been done. And then a friend of mine, Stuart Artingstall, punched every hair into the head. He worked about 8 days, I think, the first time, 12 hours a day, just punching hair into this head. Then trying to get the bald cap on was in itself the most difficult makeup I've ever done in my life. So if you moved it a 1/16 of an inch in any direction, it completely threw off the hairline. I told him at the time, I'll never do this again. I'm glad you got the shot, you know, I'm glad it worked. I'll never do it again. So another month goes by, I get a phone call. Oh, we're shooting a whole new ending to the film.
Despite all that, the effects aren't bad for the entire movie. The alien suit is amazing, and I think it's better than the suits in the previous movies. Something that does look great are the matte paintings. The matte paintings in Alien 3 are gorgeous and easily hold up today. The miniature effects for the exteriors, however, fail to give off a sense of scale, so they don't seem big. Alien 3 doesn't look as good as Alien or Aliens, but it's also more ambitious with its effects. The rod puppet, had it been composited better, would have been one of the most convincing creature effects in film history up to that point, and it would have remained so until Jurassic Park and future CGI would get more convincing. I shouldn't have to clarify this, but while special effects aren't the be-all and end-all, just watch classic Doctor Who, they are still very important, especially in a series that depicts future technology, far-off planets, and extraterrestrial life. While some of the effects are quite good, the fact that it isn't as impressive or more impressive than its predecessors means that it fails to live up to the lofty expectations a film in this series needs to meet. The film has a notorious plot hole, one that is very important and hard to ignore or forgive due to how much of the movie depends on it. It has to do with the alien egg that ends up on the Sulaco and leads to the fire and Ripley and the aliens' arrival on Fury 161. Namely, there is no explanation as to how the egg got there in the first place. In Aliens, the alien queen snuck on board the Sulaco and battled Ripley, and presumably this was when the egg was hidden away. But the queen's ovipositor had been destroyed by Ripley before the queen detached from it and left it behind, and at no point is she seen carrying an egg. Even if she could lay more eggs, it seems to be a process that takes time, judging by the eggs being gestated inside her ovipositor, and not something she could do quickly on a whim. It is also unclear when the egg got onto the Sulaco either. If the queen had carried it, then there is a very small window when she isn't on camera when she could have done so. Also, where could she have placed it? Could it be inside the dropship that she hitched a ride on? This isn't explained either. There are theories that Bishop may have planted the egg prior to being sliced in half. This kind of relies on him being a dick to the main characters.
I want these specimens destroyed as soon as you're finished with them. Is that clear?
Mr. Burke gave instructions that they were to be kept alive in stasis for return to the company labs. He was very specific about it.
He was ordered by Burke earlier to study the aliens, but then he spilled the beans very quickly and then helped the humans. This also has marks against it since Bishop is helpful in Aliens, placing himself in danger and risking his existence to help the humans escape LV-426. It's a moment very similar to the Terminator's self-sacrifice in Terminator 2. Bishop is acknowledging a concern for his own safety and well-being, something a living creature would do, yet puts himself in harm's way to help others. It's a powerful scene, so the theory that Bishop brought the eggs doesn't sit well with me.
Believe me, I'd prefer not to. I may be synthetic, but I'm not stupid.
There is no explanation that makes sense other than to just assume that this is a retcon. It's also disappointing because many people were unhappy that Hicks and Newt were killed off in the opening credits, and the early in-universe explanation is also a big plot hole.
What do you think killed, babe? Beats me. He's just keeled over.
Similarly, there is no explanation given for the single facehugger scene being able to infect two hosts, Ripley and the Ox.
Hey, Brett. What's this?
The facehuggers in the previous movies, and indeed the rest of the canon, infect a single host, then die. The movie shows only a single egg, and when Ripley is able to speak to Bishop and he accesses the flight recorder, he doesn't correct Ripley when she asks if there was an alien on board. He then instead says that there was a single alien.
Was there an alien on board?
Yes.
Is it on the Sulaco, or did it come with us in the EV?
It was with us all the way.
Like the other plot hole, the only way it makes sense is another disappointing retcon. It was eventually proposed that a royal facehugger can infect two hosts, one with a regular chestburster and one with a queen chestburster. This would be perfectly logical. A new queen could lay eggs and wait for the drone to bring hosts to impregnate with chestbursters. While it is a somewhat plausible suggestion, it is unsatisfactory since it is never clarified in the movie itself. Alien 3 is a step down from Aliens. No weapons, less advanced technology, just one alien. All of these things are less advanced and less intense than the stakes in the second movie in the series.
Check it out. I am the ultimate badass.
Yeah. We got nukes, we got knives, sharp sticks.
You do not want to fuck with me.
This is a maximum security prison. And you have no weapons of any kind? Then we're fucked.
It is worth noting that William Gibson, Eric Red, and David Tui's scripts for the movie all involved many aliens and lots of fighting and action, while the Vincent Ward script that eventually became the shooting script was the outlier. Typical sequels involve escalation. The threat in each subsequent film is greater than the threat before it. Alien 3's teaser trailer would suggest a conflict where the alien arrived on Earth, potentially putting billions of humans in jeopardy.
In 1992, we will discover on Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
That teaser trailer is yet another reason for the movie's bad reception, as many fans were excited for that premise, and then it wasn't delivered. Some of you might be saying, but Tin Man, Resident Evil and the Fast and the Furious kept getting more intense. They ended up being completely absurd and over the top. The Fast and the Furious started off as people stealing TVs and then goes to this. Wait, you can't jump over that cliff. It's impossible. Nothing's impossible when you've got family. Alien 3 being a step down from Aliens could therefore be argued as an intentional effort to avoid getting too silly and over the top. James Bond has actually done this before, twice. Both For Your Eyes Only and Casino Royale literally and figuratively bring the series back to Earth, after Moonraker's plot of a genocidal space billionaire plotting to end life on Earth from his space station, and Die Another Day's plot of a rogue North Korean general who had gene therapy to become white using a space laser to blow up the DMZ. Having a toned-down sequel allowed the series to reset things for future movies. The threat of the alien falling into Weyland-Yutani's hands is very nebulous, and after being brought up a few times only becomes relevant to the movie's plot near the very end. And some of you might be saying, but Tin Man, you love The Thing, and that movie has the threat of the alien villain trying to escape to a large population center. Well, yes, but The Thing and the Xenomorph are very different.
I don't know what the hell's in there, but it's weird and pissed off, whatever it is.
The thing about The Things is that The Thing establishes pretty quickly that the Things can assimilate anything it comes across. Okay, I need to say that again. What The Thing does in the movie... Oh, I gotta start over again. The movie called The Thing establishes very quickly that the unnamed alien villain, which are referred to as things, can assimilate any life form they come across.
You see, what we're talking about here is an organism that imitates other life forms, and it imitates them perfectly. When this thing attacked our dogs, it tried to digest them, absorb them, and in the process shape its own cells to imitate them.
We see the remains of the Norwegian camp, the characters see it as well. It tries to assimilate the dogs, and we realize that some of the humans have already been assimilated by the time the humans catch on to what's happening. Since the characters and audience know the things can assimilate other life forms, they believe, based on the information presented, that just one escaping Antarctica and finding a population center could doom all life on Earth. This threat lingers throughout the movie, rather than being tacked on at the very end like in Alien 3. A single alien all but wiped out the crew of the Nostromo, but they didn't have any effective weapons against it and had limited options for dealing with it since its acid blood could melt through the hull and expose them to space. The aliens on LV-426, once the Marines have access to their weapons and are better aware of the situation, prove more than capable of killing many aliens with their pulse rifles and grenades. Meanwhile, the things are almost impossible to kill, with only flamethrowers, which all Antarctic scientists bring with them because the fun police can't get you in Antarctica, able to stop them. Also, the thing is revealed to be intelligent, with one of them building a tiny flying saucer in an attempt to escape. This means that it could become a threat to not just Earth, but to other planets that it comes across. The threat of the alien villain escaping works better in The Thing than in Alien 3 for those reasons. Alien 3's stakes being lower than Aliens, having fewer aliens and less impressive technology and weapons and science fiction elements makes it less interesting, and doesn't build on the previous movie or add to it as a sequel to it. I saved the biggest issue for last, a sore point that has remained sore for many fans of the series since the film's release in 1992. Much like Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, the plot relies on an unsatisfactory undoing of events. Terminator 3 reveals that Judgment Day is inevitable and can't be stopped, undoing the efforts of the heroes in Terminator 2. While Alien 3 has an alien egg get snuck onto the Sulaco, which leads to the deaths of most of the crew and Ripley crash landing on Fury 161, where an alien begins killing the people there. There are plenty of horror movies that kill off the previous movie's survivors in the next installment, but Alien 3's opening isn't bad because it does something seen in other horror movies. It is the way that Hicks, Newt and Bishop are shoved out of the way unceremoniously in the opening credits that upset a lot of people. Were fans and audiences asking for too much, or acting entitled, when they wanted to see their favourite characters alive and well? No! The studio makes its money off of fans and audiences. The movie business is based around giving people something they want to watch. It is worth pointing out that Hicks and Newt have little growth in Aliens, and are mostly there for Ripley's story arc of healing and overcoming her trauma, eventually defeating the Alien Queen. Some out there like that Alien 3 undoes the over-the-top and happy ending of Aliens. The justification for this is that the Alien universe is a dark sci-fi setting, where corporations treat human lives as expendable, and humans eke out miserable existences in the coldness of space. However, this completely ignores that Aliens is a story, where Ripley goes through immense hardship and defies death in order to rescue Newt from the alien queen. The quote-unquote death of Bishop is also deeply unsatisfying. Ripley went through a major story arc in Aliens, where she initially didn't trust Bishop and was fearful of him due to her bad experiences with Ash and Alien. But over the course of the movie, Bishop proves himself to be heroic, not just to Ripley, but to the audience. Bishop even puts his android life on the line, despite showing a concern for his well-being that could be interpreted as fear. This is the epitome of bravery, doing something even if it scares you because you know it's the right thing to do.
Ripley, I'm scared.
Me too.
Believe me, I'd prefer not to. I may be synthetic, but I'm not stupid.
This story arc Ripley goes through is pointless due to Bishop's quick demise, brief reactivation, and then being deactivated shortly after. It is clear that the screenwriters and producers felt that there was no room for Hicks, Newt, and Bishop in the story. Imagine if the trio survived. Hicks would be making efforts protecting Ripley from the other prisoners. Newt would be very out of place in the prison setting, stuck in a place that in all likelihood has a much higher proportion of child murderers than her usual haunts. Rather than come up with interesting things for them to do in this setting, or change the setting to better suit the characters, they took the easy decision and killed them off. It's almost like when you're playing a role-playing game, and the DM forces the plot to go in a direction by arbitrarily saying, rocks fall and block all the roads except this one, which you must walk down now. Note that when Ripley sets off to rescue Newt, the colony's atmosphere processor is about to be consumed in a nuclear explosion, meaning that all of the aliens will be killed and presumably the engineer spacecraft will be destroyed also. Ripley has already ensured their destruction, but she goes into the hive anyway to save Newt. As seen in my other video, Newt by this point is a replacement figure for Ripley's daughter Amanda, who passed away while Ripley was in hypersleep between Alien and Aliens. The alien attacking the crew of the Nostromo in Alien caused Ripley to lose her daughter, and Ripley isn't going to allow the alien from repeating this tragedy with Newt. In rescuing Newt from the aliens, she is reuniting with a daughter figure. Assuming that the mystery egg on the Sulaco was placed there by the Queen when it hitched a ride on the dropship, then Alien 3 wouldn't have happened if Ripley had abandoned Newt to die, as it was Ripley's journey to the hive to rescue Newt that allowed the Queen to stow away on the dropship in the first place. It's thoroughly unpleasant to be told this amazing heroic sacrifice that Ripley made has doomed her, Bishop, and Hicks to horrible deaths. Watching the end of Aliens knowing that Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and Bishop will all suffer horrible ends not long afterwards is like watching Return of the Jedi knowing that Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order will be destroyed, reducing Luke to a pathetic hermit, that Han and Leia will marry, then divorce, and that Palpatine isn't really dead and has a fleet of Star Destroyers, each with a Death Star laser. For this reason above the others I mentioned, I can only really enjoy Alien 3 by ignoring what happens in Aliens. Some of you might be thinking, but Tin Man, in real life people die suddenly and out of nowhere all the time. This is just a reflection of how cruel and random real life can be. It is true in real life that important people in your life can die or be changed for the worse very suddenly, or without you being there to see it. Such moments would be anticlimactic, random, cruel, and unfair. It isn't to say that movies can't have these elements take place, but it needs to be remembered that in a movie, with characters, stories, and themes that the audience is attached to and invested in, the killing off of beloved characters so swiftly, brutally, and off-screen frustrates the audience's desire to be entertained, which is the primary purpose of a movie, especially a big-budget sequel in a popular franchise. Alien 3's basic story and premise is strong, and there are lots of positives to the movie. But in my dream what-if scenario, the movie is improved by divorcing it from Alien and Aliens and having it feature a new cast of characters, much like how Predator 2 has a different cast to the first film, but features a different Yautja hunting on Earth. I would have Alien 3 involve a different cast. This would solve numerous issues. Ripley, Hicks, Newt, and Bishop keep their happy ending from Aliens. and the story arc of Ripley facing her fears and redeeming herself for not being there for her daughter Amanda isn't undone. There is no need to retcon an alien egg onto the Sulaco, as whatever backstory this new movie has can be written from scratch, rather than being hastily retconned. Having aliens from places other than LV-426 would expand world building. A big issue I have with Alien Resurrection, the movie after Alien 3, is that a character says that with Ripley's death, all known traces of the xenomorph were gone, which is really limiting world building, and also made basically the entire expanded universe, which has a lot of great stories in it, non-canon. This alternative version would open the same way. Clarence, this film's counterpart to Clemens, is a doctor working on an isolated mining outpost on a cold and desolate world called Fury 161. He sees the EEV crash land nearby and rescues the sole survivor, a woman we'll call Shipley, this film's version of Ripley. The other crew are all dead, but an android member may be salvageable. The EEV had followed a guidance beacon used by the outpost for starship navigation, but crash-landed due to damage to its guidance system, rather than landing near the prison as a coincidence. The miners, not prisoners, who live and work on this outpost are rough, tough, and at the end of their tethers on a backwater world, but crucially are more likable than the prisoners in Alien 3. Like the prisoners, they have turned to religion to keep them going, something that Clarence personally doesn't find comfort in. Remember what I said earlier about all the prisoners all being too similar? Well, here, the miners have different reasons for being on the planet in the first place. Some are trying to provide for their families, others could just be braggarts with gold fever. Another could be paying off debts to bad people. These wouldn't be major subplots, but would flesh out the characters, much in the same way that the crew of the Nostromo all have different motivations and backgrounds. The outpost doesn't have problems with lice, and all the miners keep their hair. This helps them be more distinctive visually. The decision to have Ripley shave her head in Alien 3 was to show how Ripley had become unwanted. The convicts view her as a monster due to her femininity, and the stripping of her hair, along with her surrogate daughter Newt, visualizes her fall into despair. However, there is no need for this character arc in this alternate version, which I'll go into later. Shipley wakes up and is devastated to learn that the crew are dead. However, she starts acting suspicious and demands to autopsy and later cremate the bodies. Clarence suspects that she knows more than she's letting on. Shipley acting suspicious and looking at the body of her companions would have been an interesting hint for the audience that she has had something to do with the alien. But while the movie does have this element, the suspicions of Ripley end abruptly with her trying to warn people of the alien and with Clement's death. It would also provide suspense, since the audience would be able to piece together that she's involved with the aliens somehow, had they seen the first two movies. But the other characters are unaware of the impending danger. To paraphrase Alfred Hitchcock, suspense comes when the characters don't know there's a time bomb about to go off under the table. Shipley later repairs the android member of the crew and consults it in secret, which further arises suspicion from Clarence and the audience, who see this consultation, but don't hear all of the details. This would further build up the suspense element. While Clarence is basically Clemens, someone who once had a future but squandered it, and is now living in a self-imposed exile, or penance, on the other side of the galaxy, Shipley is going to be a different character to Ripley. Unlike Ripley, Shipley is a more morally ambiguous character, someone who would have sex with someone to silence them. When Ripley does this in Alien 3, it comes off as out of character to me. Ripley had a determination to do the right thing in Alien and Aliens, even if it was hard to do, and she doesn't strike me as someone who would use her body to manipulate others, but instead as someone who would be honest with someone probing for information, rather than betting them into silence. The intent of this plot point is to show how far she has fallen after the deaths of those close to her, but like with the hair, there is no need for this plot point now. Meanwhile, a few facehuggers crawl out of the EEV and into the mines, and attack an isolated group of miners, impregnating them with aliens. The group regain consciousness sometime later, but are killed by chestbursters before they can return to the surface. This alternate version of Alien 3 has fewer xenomorphs than Aliens does, but more than the solitary alien in Alien and Alien 3. At the same time, the miners in this version don't have the advanced military weapons that the colonial marines use, but would have enough to stand somewhat of a chance, however slim, against an alien attack, unlike the near-primitive conditions of the prison facility in Alien 3. This means that the story now has multiple attack scenes and action sequences, while still not trying to outdo the scale of Aliens. I also wouldn't bother with the Bishop 2 character, a copy of Bishop who may or may not be an android, who arrives to offer Ripley a chance to have the chest burster removed from her surgically. Lance Henriksen was originally offered the role of one of the prisoners, and then had the Bishop 2 role written for him after he declined that earlier role. Due to hasty rewrites and editing, his performance created ambiguity onto whether or not he was a human being or an advanced android. His grimacing in pain and this line of dialogue was cut in the theatrical version, making it seem like he barely cared for his injuries.
I'm not a droid!
While the character serves a purpose, being a temptation for Ripley that she refuses, sacrificing herself to destroy the alien and prevent Weyland-Yutani from getting her hands on it, there's nothing gained from the character being a duplicate of Bishop. Whether Bishop 2 is an android or a human is meaningless to the movie. It doesn't impact the plot, and it doesn't add anything interesting to the lore. Rather, it stretches believability for Bishop's design to be based on a human who also happens to be involved in bioweapons and who is involved personally in missions. Also, they do this really subtle thing where a character tempts a hero with the chance to go to a normal life, but the noble hero refuses and then sacrifices themselves with their arms outstretched and dies. It's very subtle. The rest of the movie would pan out largely the same, with some other notable changes. Clarence doesn't die halfway through, and remains a main protagonist. Clemens was one of the more interesting characters in Alien 3, and is arguably played by the best actor in the film.
Not as a result of the accident, but because I prescribed the wrong dosage of painkiller. I got 7 years in prison and my license reduced to a 3C. At least I got off the morphine. I think I was let off lightly.
His premature death, as I explained earlier, robbed the cast of one of its better characters, while numerous less interesting ones were still alive. It would also give him a story arc, giving him the opportunity to repent his sins and maybe even end his self-imposed exile. Shipley is impregnated with a chestburster after being captured by the aliens, rather than having her hypersleep capsule broken into like Ripley's. She escapes, but knows her time is running out. This prevents the plot hole of the gestation taking far longer than it normally would. Shipley also has some kind of dark secret involving Weyland-Yutani and the alien, one that she is desperate to keep to herself. She worked for Weyland-Yutani's bioweapons division on an isolated laboratory in deep space. A single alien escaped, which led to an outbreak that wiped out everyone except her and a handful of survivors who fled onto an escape ship, unaware that they had brought facehuggers with them. The ship was damaged in the hasty escape, leading to its crash landing later. Shipley's backstory would mean that the audience and characters know of the danger of a single alien escaping, let alone a small group of them. The threat of Weyland-Yutani arriving to collect her, something she instigated herself during her sketchy behavior earlier, would be an ever-present threat, rather than just something that pops up in the climax. The changes I suggested are purely hypothetical, as the finished movie already came out way back in 1992, but I wanted to show how many of the ideas within the movie are perfectly fine, but don't fit into a story trying to follow Alien and Aliens. Despite all the movie's flaws, I would call the assembly cut of Alien 3 a good movie, with a lot of interesting things to say, memorable moments, a great score, good acting, and good set design. But despite all these positives and the clear talent and effort that was put into it, it fails as a sequel to Alien and Aliens. Despite the greater budget, the film's troubled and convoluted production led to a film that was maligned for years, and while it has partially been rehabilitated by the release of the assembly cut, the film still has weaker characters, special effects, and stakes, while the script has plot holes, contradictions with previously established lore, and killed off beloved characters in the opening credits. The deaths of Hicks and Newt, and later Bishop, were highly criticized by fans at the time, and while it is arguably disrespectful to the characters, their deaths are shown to be shocking and saddening. It is a testament to how loved they were by audiences that their deaths provoked such reactions, but the movie doesn't try to brush them off as if their deaths mean nothing. Ripley is clearly shaken by it and spends the rest of the movie in this horrible state. Alien 3 was the feature film directorial debut of David Fincher, whose output before the movie was Madonna music videos, but whose output since includes Seven, Fight Club, Gone Girl, and many other critically and commercially successful movies. Fincher hated the production process of Alien 3 so much that he disowned it, rarely talks about it, and didn't participate in the making of the assembly cut of the movie, while the other Alien films all have director's cuts supervised by their directors. James Cameron, who was otherwise pretty diplomatic about the film, called it a slap in the face to the fans who were invested in those characters in his DVD commentary for Aliens. Which is kind of weird since apparently it was his idea to kill John Connor in the opening of Terminator Dark Fate, but whatever. The James Cameron of today is very different to the James Cameron of the 1980s and 1990s. Alien 3 is often seen as a pessimistic, nihilistic movie. However, it is a movie where characters who have everything taken from them and have little hope left make the ultimate sacrifice in order to save others. The prisoners sacrifice himself to be used as bait to lure the alien into the lead works, and Ripley sacrifices a possible chance to return to a normal life and have a family again in order to deny the alien to Weyland-Yutani. Like The Thing, which is one of my favourite movies, the ending is almost heartwarming in a way, in that humanity will try to fight for what is right even when things are hopeless. Even when facing certain death, they make a meaningful difference to save people who will never know of their sacrifice. This may or may not have been the conclusion to the story of Alien and Aliens that many wanted, but as a story in of itself, it is poignant and meaningful. The Bishop 2 scene is the movie's problems in a nutshell. It has some interesting ideas that just don't belong with the rest of the movie, and behind the scenes changing of ideas and rewrites muddied the waters and diluted the effectiveness of the premise. It's just a shame that a movie with so much talent in front of and behind the camera, and that had so many things to say, was mismanaged from the start and doomed by studio interference and incompetence, and that for all of the movie's strengths, it ultimately fails as a sequel to its predecessors.
Everyone was, saying, oh, the first and the second one were better. And it's like, well, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I'm not quite sure. I do know that if this film wasn't following the other two, it would have probably gotten more acclaim than it did. Because I thought as a movie, as a standalone, it was great. Unfortunately, you're following in the footsteps of Cameron and Ridley's. Right. Tough shoes to fill.